Hello. Hey, Carl.
Hey, Kyle.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. Give everyone a few minutes here. Hey, Thomas. Hey, Thomas. Oh.
Can you hear me?
I can. How are you, Thomas?
Doing all right.
Great.
So you gave me an excuse to come home and eat lunch.
Very good. Very good.
Do you have people responding on the Facebook event at all?
I did have a couple people, yeah, and I want to, like I said to this group, I want to kind of come up with a format where we can do this more regularly, and ideally maybe do some more themed ones. And I don't think this one will be necessarily like launching any new trail concept or idea, but had a good time looking at some old images and things from the past. And as I was going through it, I realized I don't really have the whole history of the Western Slope, and I think that's an important piece that we need to put together so people kind of know where we were coming from. So you'll see in the slides here, I found was able to pull up from the Internet Archives the old Shenandoah Mountain Bike Club website.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And I need to find, I know that Branch had a bunch of logos and images on his computer, and Carl got them off for me and gave them to me, and I think they're on my old computer. I hadn't really thought about it until I started putting this together.
I think I have backup files, disks somewhere from Branch's stuff, the coalition stuff from Carl as well.
Yeah, so I was thinking about that, thinking about you, and thinking about all the. It's amazing. I was looking through some of the photo galleries from the old website, and the photos are fun, but it's just laughable how low quality the images are. Like I could barely tell. Winsy's in one of them. Can barely tell it's a Winsy or just a dirt trail.
Yeah. How you doing, Carl?
I'm doing great. Doing great. A little double duty today. I'm at the office, but I got 3 of my girls here for a little while the other one has an appointment.
Looks like we got Dusty and Mark Stecker. I see a Dale's iPad. I haven't guessed what Dale that might be, but who knows? I'll give it a few more minutes since it just actually rang at noon.
I'm sure at some point I'll go the way breaking up some argument between a 9 and 11-year-old.
That's fine. I'll once I start going here, I'll keep you muted until you're talking. How about that?
Whatever. Sure. Might be best for all.
Dale's iPad is dough broth there, Kyle.
I figured, Dale. How are you? It's good to hear your voice.
We're good. We're good. Thomas knows how much fun I've been having and stuff I've been breaking.
Yeah, it's good to see you out on the Western Slope, Dale.
Thanks. I'm going to mute again since Dorothy and I are here eating lunch.
No problem.
You all hear me?
I can.
All right. I was having trouble with audio for a minute.
Got Valerie coming in. And I'll give it 2 more minutes here. All right, we'll get started here. Let me pull this up. Cool. All right. We got Colin Hughes joining us and a few others, and I just put this up on Facebook as well. So I just wanted to run through real quick, brief overview about the Western Slope before we talk about answering some questions and talk to the folks on this call. And so I'm going to get started here. Oh. So I was just talking to everyone how part of the history of the Western Slope, a big part of the history is that it was first kind of started under the SHEN-ROCK Mountain Bike Club. So I was able to pull this old logo off the SHEN-ROCK Mountain Bike Club website from their Internet Wayback Archive. And if you look at the mission statement for the SHEN-ROCK Mountain Bike Club, you see that it was geared towards an IMBA club, preserving access, national forest, getting volunteers involved in proper techniques and trail maintenance. And quickly, maybe not too quickly, because the club started. Thomas, what year did the club start, the SHEN-ROCK Mountain Bike Club?
96.
Okay. So the website for the club starts in about 2003. And about 2004 is when the club formalized the setup with Massanutten Resort. So before that, there were trails at Massanutten Resort on the Western Slope, but you couldn't legally ride there unless you were a property owner and had a Massanutten pass. 2004, Thomas was instrumental in getting a setup where if you were a member of the Shenandoah Valley Bicycle Coalition, or at the time Shenandoah Mountain Bike Club, excuse me, and you did trail work, you could get a pass. At the time, you had to do trail work and be a member. There was no donation piece. I was actually thinking back to the first time I ever rode on the Western Slope. It was 2003, parked out on the road somewhere because you weren't supposed to park in the parking lot. I believe I may have been with Thomas. And we biked up Del Webb Road and got in on the trail at the top by the overlook. And at the time, there was no upper ravine. So the only way was to go all the way out to Kaler's and come down through the Laird's downhill back into the Western Slope. And I remember being really amazed at this area because it was undeveloped and it had the remnants of a barn and cul-de-sacs in this area that, hearing the story that it was supposed to be developed for Massanutten Resort. So like I said, that first ride I went on was with Thomas. This photo is from Just Daddy-O. This is up on the Puzzler Trail more recently. And this quote from Thomas is in one of the pieces she did in the REI co-op journal. The quote is, I believe, about the Puzzler Trail, but Thomas, like I said, was the one from the beginning who kind of got this set up with Massanutten going to open up the Western Slope for access. And from the beginning, it was about trail work, trail building, trail maintenance. Pretty much as soon as that pass system started, is that correct, Thomas?
Yeah, we started doing trail work before the pass system, but the pass system was kind of something we had kind of asked for because we started doing all this work and thought it was a good way to motivate people for trail work and get legitimate access.
Do you remember what the first trail was that we built out there?
The first project that Kenny asked us to build, I believe, was the Big Stump Trail, which was just like a 200-yard section. And it was just connecting the two little access logging roads, which we call a trail now. But that was kind of, I think, one of the first pieces, that and along with the kind of back way up to Kaler's, up to the Sitting Rock, which that section is actually in National Forest. But those two were both around the same time frame, which was a 94 to 95 time period.
Cool. And so moving on, while that was all happening, while the trail passes and the trail construction was happening, there's a long history of events on the Western Slope. And I can't remember off the top of my head how old or how many years the hoo-ha has been around at this point. Any guesses?
1988 was the first hoo-ha. Yeah, 88, I'm pretty sure.
88. Okay. Well, I want to reshare. I know Scott Wooten did a documentary on the hoo-ha a number of years back and kind of retraced the history of it. And so the picture on the right here is from the Super D race that the bike club used to run from Kaler's, which turned into the Enduro. That's Mike Carpenter there on a hardtail. And I think even before there was trail there, the hoo-ha was or before there was trail maintenance and trail passes there, the hoo-ha was something that put that trail system on the map, even with the existing trails, and people knew there was mountain biking on the Western Slope, right, Thomas?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, mostly I think kind of locals at that point. People came from out of town for the hoo-ha race, but back then people would travel to the races as an excuse to ride somewhere new. But that seemed to be about the only time people would travel to ride, was mostly to kind of go to a race like the hoo-ha or something.
Okay. So then looking back on our websites, we actually have on the Coalition website an archive of all of the old newsletters. We don't have the old Shenandoah Mountain Bike Club newsletters, but we do have the Shenandoah Valley Bike Club newsletters back to '83. We also have the Coalition newsletters that used to be printed, and they were called the Mellow Velo, and that was put together by Branch and had a lot of different contributors. And April 2008, you can see this on here, that the start of the Coalition, it's alive. I believe the process started and was formalized in 2007 or very early 2008. And that was when we joined the Shenandoah Mountain Bike Club with the Shenandoah Valley Bicycle Club. And so this Mellow Velo was launched. There's some cool stuff in here. Talks a lot about the Massanutten trail work. I didn't clip the other pages, but talks about the number of trail passes being in the 30s or 40s back in 2008 or so. And so some neat stuff there. And we have our old logo on the left, and Dusty's on this call. Dusty's redone all of our logos and things, but the original logo is on the left there. And one of the new logos that Dusty has done is in the bottom left corner. So a little bit of history. I hadn't seen this Mellow Velo clip for a while. And then, go ahead.
Real quick, I don't know if I see Mark Stecker's on this. He might be able to give some audio recap of the history, because I think he goes back, nothing to your age, Mark, but he goes back a little bit, probably before me, in terms of some of the mountain biking there on the Western Slope.
Oh, I remember, well, I moved here in '91 and remembered riding on the Western Slope, like without a pass, just riding out there from town, even not even riding out in a car. And I don't know, as far as the hoo-ha goes, I remember it, at that time. But there really weren't any trails. I mean, it was just like drainage ditches going straight up and straight down the mountain. And some days they were in pretty good shape, and if there was a bad storm, they were in pretty bad shape. It just sort of changed continually through the summer. So what Thomas and all the volunteers have done over the last, whatever it is, 25, 30 years since I've been here, it's just incredible.
One of the things I'd like to do sometime is get together a more formal history presentation on the Western Slope and dig into the old farm that was there. A lot of the oldest trails are old farm roads from that farm and access roads. The old barn that has fallen down, the spring house that Creekside goes by, and dig into some of that history on that. And we might have an opportunity to, in the coming months, is looking at some opportunities to do some broader discussion and planning with the Kieseltown community. All right, so I did want to show this here. This is a small, you can see our old trail map on there, but you can also see the property that Massanutten owns, and this is maybe not accurate anymore. They probably own more, and it would all have to be surveyed, but the pink is the Massanutten property. So you can see that we're using a small part on the Western Slope, and since this map, the Special K Trail and also the Puzzler Trail head further south here. But you can see there's a lot of space to keep going around the edge of the mountain here. And on the north side, we're in national forest, so we're more limited in what we can and can't do. And one of the big benefits for us from Massanutten is because it's private property, because of the relationship we have with the resort, we're able to build trail at a rate that's much faster than in the national forest. So the national forest, because it's federal land, public land, has a lot of necessary steps and environmental rules and regulations that make total sense, but slow down the process to build trail. So on the Western Slope, we can propose a trail concept and get it built in a fraction of the time that it takes on the National Forest. So this is kind of the canvas of Massanutten. Obviously, inside this bowl here is all the developed resort. And the history is that at one point in time, the plan was to develop the Western Slope for houses or condos. And for a number of factors, including the lack of sanitary sewer access, the resort didn't develop it. So always in the back of our head is if or when it gets developed. But at this point, we're all in for building a world-class trail system that will be an asset to anything that might be developed down the road. So we've been pretty consistent in building a new trail at Massanutten, not every year, but a lot of years. This particular piece here, the map is the Special K Trail. It actually ended up a little bit different than on that map. And I think this picture really highlights the Western Slope. You get fun flowy sections, and then you go through these rock seams and a ton of rock. So this trail started our kind of hybrid builds where the rocky parts where the whole trail was built initially by a machine. Zach Adams built that piece with a machine we rented from Shenandoah Mountain Touring. And then our volunteers came in and finished that trail. And on our survey that we did, this trail consistently comes to the top as the most popular trail for people on the Western Slope. And this was one of, Thomas kind of laid this project from the beginning. Thomas, any thoughts on why this is, I should put food in your mouth, why this is the most popular trail from people?
I think it's just probably, it's long. It doesn't have a lot of elevation gain or loss. Relatively accessible for a lot of riders. I think it has challenges without being a super intimidating trail.
And again, the rock gardens going into the smooth trail, I think that's what's so nice in Massanutten. It probably skews a little bit more towards rock than smooth trail, as most of you know. But having that machine build trail helps us get kind of the flowy sections in there. And in this case, the rock seam just ends, and then you're in some really nice dirt. So since this trail's been built, the Puzzler connects into this trail also, and we have some more connections planned. But this idea of a new trail every year or two has been pretty consistent for about 15 years. And it hasn't been every single year, but generally at least every other year. This is our most recent, well, there's a more recent map than this, but this is along the lines of the more recent maps. This particular one was highlighted for a high school mountain bike race. But we've had a really nice redesign of the maps and the logos and the signage, thanks to Dusty. Dusty, I know you're on here. Where's Dusty?
Am I still there?
Yeah. Hey, so Dusty, can you tell a little bit about why you all moved here and what your role has been with Massanutten?
Oh yeah, we moved here about 5 years ago from Wilmington, Delaware, looking for a change of scenery, looking for a rural area with a vibrant downtown and lots of riding opportunities. And we bought a house 2 miles down the road from the Western Slope parking lot in Kieseltown, and got involved in trail building. And then I'm a professional graphic designer, so I ended up, helping the coalition out with the logo, and eventually redoing the Western Slope map, getting it out of the resort's hands, and just, updating it and making it easy to update going forward, because we've been adding 1 or 2 trails a year the past couple of years. So we want to make sure it's always up to date. So, but yeah, moved here for a lot of a lot of what has been built here, mountain biking trail wise. If trails weren't here, we would probably not have chosen to live here. We read about this area in Dirt Rag magazine. 2 different issues of Dirt Rag magazine mentioned Massanutten and Stokesville and the riding opportunities down here, so we ended up moving here. So
I think that's such a powerful story, because even more than tourism, I think trails and outdoor recreation opportunities are a lot about quality of life and people wanting to live there and have something out their door. So Dusty, I remember I took you on maybe your first ride on the Western Slope when you were visiting.
Yep. Yeah,
And
when we were staying in the resort.
And there's a lot of new trails since then, huh? A lot of different experiences.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I got myself stuck on the Ridge Trail because it said bikes not recommended rather than no bikes. So I went on that Ridge Trail and almost slept out there.
Yeah, so we've come a long way even in those 5 years. So moving on here. One thing that has evolved a bit over time that I would love for Thomas to speak to is the machine building piece. So this is Zach Adams again, using that machine on the Special K Trail. And we've done a ton of great work by hand, but over the years, we've probably increasingly used machine work to help with projects, and it's helped us build more trail more quickly, but it also helps build a little bit different trail. Thomas, you want to speak to the benefits of why we've been using machines out there for, I guess, almost since the beginning, right? We started using them on even the Ravine Trail.
Yeah, the first new trail, besides little projects we did, was actually with the machine, which was the Upper Homestead Trail up to kind of the road there. Those 5 turns, that's like a half mile long, just below the road where 2,000 Hours dumps out. That was, just around 2000, maybe, right around there. And machines were, to me, being introduced as trail building. And we were like, how can you use a machine for trail building? But we quickly saw, the benefits of it, especially when it just comes to moving mass amount of materials. And I think a lot of the trails people of any skill level by riding are the things with variations in them. And that's where machines can move a lot of material, especially dirt. It's kind of get that flow going. But I think we've done a great job on the Western Slope of balancing machine and hand building, kind of create some unique trails. But I don't think anyone would argue there's such a huge benefit to machines, especially when you get an operator who also is honestly a good mountain biker and has a good eye for it. I think that's super instrumental to machine building.
Yeah, and I mean, do you have a sense after all these years of which areas are better for machine builds versus hand builds?
I used to say, you don't want to put the machines in the rocks, but I think Sam, as well as Zach, on the last 2 big trails there, the Puzzler and 4,000 Hours or Special K, they proved that you can get machines in there, do a lot of pretty cool rock work. But yeah, I think moving just dirt and really those areas, and you try to build good, proper water drainages or grade dips or grade reversals or berms by hand, they're never big enough. And as we know that when you build something, everything is going to get reduced in size. Seems like the dirt features compress and they lose half of their height. And it seems like rocks just grow. So it seems like in the dirt is really where it's most beneficial. But like I said, with the rocks, they're doing some pretty amazing things in there.
Yeah, and this machine in the picture is the same machine that Sam Skidmore used to build the most recent section of our newest trail, the Quarantine Trail. I did want to highlight, we have done some events over the years. This is a picture of the IMBA Trail Care School. So the IMBA Trail Care crew is a group that used to travel around the country. We did a morning classroom session at the Lucy Sims Center in Harrisonburg. And then we got everyone out to the Western Slope to build what was called the IMBA Trail, which is now just kind of an extension of the Boy Scout Trail. It's between Three Creeks and the Laird's Downhill. And our team who's been working on Massanutten has been talking a lot and thinking a lot about how we can get more trainings like this to our area for our volunteers so that we can expand our network of folks who are skilled and knowledgeable to help lead trail work and do trail work projects out there. So I always like this picture. We had 20 plus people out there building trail. It was a really cool event, and folks came from all over the state for that particular one, but we're really interested in trying to provide more resources for our regular volunteers here in town. And then a newer development of the Western Slope is that it's a weekly practice venue for our high school, middle school mountain bike team. So the SHEN-ROCK team uses the Western Slope every Tuesday and Thursday during the spring and fall seasons. And that's really changed the way I think a lot of us have thought about the trail system. It also has made them really amazing riders because they've grown up riding on the Western Slope, which is no small feat for anyone. And if you haven't seen it, in the spring for a couple of years now, there's been a high school race there with a couple hundred students. That's the left picture. Of course, was canceled this year, but really neat course with students from coming all over the state to race that. Dusty, you got any SHEN-ROCK comments about the trail system being used for that? I know you've been out there with your kids and with some of the groups.
I mean, I love, especially now, especially this year, but even in previous years, the increased number of kids and families out in the Western Slope, and seeing that has been really encouraging. And getting the feedback on the trails that we've been building on the lower side of the mountain have been more green as of late. Past few years I've been working on Virginia 54, and then we did Boundary and Creekside last year or 2 years ago and into last year. And the feedback on those trails that I've received has been really positive, because it's just allowing more kids to get out there, more families to get out there who aren't necessarily avid riders. And it's been really encouraging to watch that. So, so we've, our Saturday work parties have been focused on those, typically on those more green trails. And we want to continue that just because of the great feedback we're having and the number of kids that we're seeing out there. So it's becoming just having the Western Slope so close to town for everybody, but particularly for these kids and families, is such a great asset that I'm like, if all we have is going out to the National Forest and all, which are amazing trails, but they're just not that close, having this close to town is an amazing thing. So.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. The trails close to home is something that IMBA's really been pushing lately. And I think there's no doubt that if we didn't have the Western Slope, there'd be far fewer people riding mountain bikes in the area, because the National Forest trails are not just a further drive, but they're so spread out and you don't have a single access point. It's more challenging to go out and do small loops and things like that. So the Western Slope is really an essential piece, I think, to building our trails community. Also trail running, a lot of folks trail running out there. And as of late with the current pandemic, a lot of folks hiking as well. So a lot of opportunities for having those trails close to town. This season, SHEN-ROCK was obviously called off and canceled due to the pandemic, but we had over 50 student athletes registered for the spring season, which is really amazing. And it's really exciting to see that group grow and for them to have the Western Slope as a place to ride. All right. Oh, let's get to one. So we aren't always so great at celebrating our volunteers, but we're trying to do a lot better. And I know we have Carl Weisacker on this call, and this is a picture of Carl here. And 2 years ago, we started to recognize a Volunteer of the Year for the Western Slope. And Carl had really stepped up that year, and he continues to be extremely involved. And so the picture on the right, there was a little end of year party, bonfire hangout, and we gave Carl his own trail work tool, a Rogue hoe, and had it custom embroidered for him. And Carl, if you are there and available, I'd love to hear a little bit about why you started getting a lot more involved and what your whole take on the Western Slope trails is right now.
Well, I got involved. I didn't start riding until about 15 years ago, and pretty quickly came out occasionally for trail work, really liked it. It's just been in the last maybe 3 or 4 years when my kids got older and my personal schedule opened up a little bit, that I was able to come out more, and then just got completely hooked on it. I really love everything about it. The physical work, the what we're creating that people will be able to enjoy for years and years and years. And then just the social side of it too, hanging out with folks and talking about things we share in common.
Thanks. And Carl was a rock star. He was out at most every Saturday trail work and a lot of the Thursday trail works as of late, and has been really involved in helping think about some new trail layout and help us wrap our head around where we're going next. And this past year, no, Dusty, do you want to talk about our volunteer of the year for this past year? Danny?
Yeah, we had this year was Danny Vandervander, and he's done. Gosh, he stepped up to help us with our. He started coming to our Saturday work parties, and it was interesting because this guy started showing up when none of us knew him, and turned out he had gone to some Thursday work parties. And while he loved the work, he was like, "I'm never going to ride this trail off this ridge, the rocks and all this." You know, he was really intimidated by it. So he was excited to work on a trail that he was going to be spending a lot of time on, which was Creekside. And he, since then, he has full on jumped in and he mows the parking lot for us. He mows the lower trails, Boundary, Creekside, Upper Creekside, anything that has a meadow in it down the lower side of the mountain. He runs a bush hog through there on a regular basis. And in addition to doing, coming to work parties and all that. He mowed out the campsites, I think, last year up around the pond. I think he did them once this year. And just so like maintenance stuff like that we were kind of having a hard time, getting done. Now he and I were talking yesterday. He wants to go out and mow down all the overgrowth around the berms on the short track. Stuff like that we're kind of, when we're focused on building trail, we're not necessarily doing some of the broader maintenance stuff, and the resort's not, doing it either. So Danny has been instrumental in getting the place dialed in that regard, which has been really cool. He helped us. His friend Don, who has excavation equipment, the two of them come out and they've done drainage work in the parking lot, trying to help us to dry the parking lot out, putting drains in above the parking lot to divert the water, and just all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's
awesome.
He's
been a huge help. And I did get a question in the chat that I'll answer in a second. If you have other questions, please throw them in the chat box there. We'll get to them in just a few minutes here. Thanks, Dusty. Yeah, Danny's out there. I see him out there most of the times I'm out there. Thomas, this is a more recent piece out here, and we haven't told this story very well to folks. The Appalachian Conservation Corps, who's been helping us. Would you be willing to speak to this a little bit and what our hopes and dreams are for them in the future here?
Yeah. So the Appalachian Conservation Corps group reached out to the coalition about using the Western Slope as a area where they could train their new crew leaders. All the work that Conservation Corps group does is usually on public lands. So last year was the first time in the fall where we set up an opportunity for them to do training work. And what they were looking for was to do finish work on machine-built trail. And the timing couldn't have been better. Because we had a lot of machine-built trail that needed to be finished with the puzzler. So, and this is a relationship that we was hoping would not just be one time, which was last fall. And that went very well, which then was supposed to lead to 3 different opportunities this year for them to bring their team together to do a week-long training session. And their training sessions are usually a week long, somewhere between maybe 25 and 40 members in their crew. And these are the people who are going to be leading other crews throughout the year. Like I said, on usually public lands, a lot of federal public lands. So we did have another opportunity to have them again this spring, which I believe this photo here is them working on a new trail right above Gravity Monkey. And looks like we're not going to have many more this year just because of the pandemic. But I'm sure many of you have seen them camping either up by the pond, or this spring they were camping down near the parking area. But that experience that they're trying to provide for their crew leaders in training is not just out there building trail, but it's how to live in the woods for a week, camping, working as a group, cooking, and all the things that basically they're going to have to do in the field. So we really think this is a long-term relationship with Zach Foster, who grew up here in the Valley, and he started this branch of the Conservation Corps group. We call that Appalachian Conservation Corps. So where we won't have them anymore this year, we hope to have them back next year. It's a great source of work, and it's just another awesome partnership between the coalition and another group.
Yeah, it's really awesome. And the Appalachian Conservation Corps is really one of the largest conservation corps in the East, and they're based out of Harrisonburg. There are offices over on Acorn Drive, but they send crews to all over the Southeast. So Georgia, Tennessee, West Virginia, North Carolina. We haven't been terribly successful in getting them on our national forest trails. We've been working on that. They work a lot in SHEN-ROCK National Park. But hopefully next year we'll have a bunch of crews training out there to help us with some of the builds. This picture right here was taken this spring, right before the pandemic started. And this is the Special K end of the Quarantine Trail, which leads into some new trail stuff. People have probably heard a lot about the Puzzler Trail, which is up at the top. If you haven't checked it out, we're sorry that we weren't able to do a grand opening on it this year. We were hoping to do one. We were especially interested in inviting the Kieseltown community to come out and take a look at that trail. It connects to the Ridgetop Trail, but the Ridgetop Trail that exists between the Overlook and the top of the ski slopes, so kind of south from the Overlook parking lot. And this top part took about 2 years of handwork from volunteers to put the rocks in place. And the lower part was built by machine by Sam Skidmore and finished with volunteers. It's, I would say, definitely our most challenging project to date. And it's a pretty amazing new connection. In addition, it's the trail that goes furthest south and would be the trail that we might eventually be able to continue further south from. Thomas, you got any other thoughts on the Puzzler after you've had some time away from it?
No, I mean, I think it's opening the door to where's one of the previous slides you showed, it's where all that property exists, and it really is south of Del Webb Drive. So I think, we'll continue that balance of, maintaining and building new trail on the north side of Del Webb Drive. I think in terms of expanding the acreage and hopefully potentially one day connecting to the lift service trails. This is hopefully the kind of the gateway to that.
Do you have a total count of volunteer hours on the Puzzler Trail? Or a guesstimate?
I don't. I mean, it's up there. Yeah, it's well over 2,000 hours. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that was, like I mentioned, that having the Conservation Corps group out there was super beneficial, and I think that was also a great opportunity where the Thursday and Saturday Trailworks crews, I think, really kind of bonded and were able to start teaming up on projects together.
Yeah, so if you haven't checked out the Puzzler Trail, definitely get up there and take a look. Even just for a hike or a trail run, it's a beautiful piece of trail. Sometimes it's hard to even appreciate the rock work when you're riding down it because you need to see just how much rock had to be built up on the side. So the Puzzler took about 2 years. It was wrapped up last year. We didn't have that great grand opening due to the coronavirus, but hopefully we can do something to celebrate that most ambitious project to date with more volunteer hours than any other trail we've built. All right, so in terms of some new projects, Harlan wasn't able to join us on the call, but Harlan Price has done an amazing job starting the process for a skills area in the Western Slope. And we'll probably do a later call that talks a lot more about this and some of the other things planned, but I wanted to just touch on it real quickly. So you can see the aerial view over here. This area that's drawn out is close to 1.5 acres, and you can see the berms on the short track and the pavilion over here. So it's just all in the woods in this interesting little corner here. It's got a little bit of elevation. It's just below the short track. Creekside trails over here, and Smoke Tree Lane comes in over there. This is a concept map of some things we're thinking about doing there, but it sounds like we'll have some dirt drop there and start to build at least some of the initial features maybe next month. We've been talking about this a bit, asking for help and donations and people to pitch in, but it'll be a really neat skills area that'll have some tree cover and be accessible from the parking lot, and you'll be able to see it from the parking lot as well. And it's not going to have anything extreme. It's going to be, think pump track / power line at Hillendale with a bunch of other added features, well done and thought out. We're not talking about big jumps. We're talking about things you can practice on and build up your skill. And then our idea is to then incorporate some of those features into elsewhere in the trail system. So the Quarantine Trail is our other newest build. Again, this is that same machine. This is Sam Skidmore building the Quarantine Trail just below the Honeycomb intersection. And then this map is a little bit different than what you're used to seeing, but the purple here is that Quarantine Trail. And without going too deep into it, the part that Sam built is actually at the top of the map, and the part that the Appalachian Conservation Corps was building is right where it says Upper Homestead here, from there down on the purple. We're not going to connect the trail through this year, but we're going to build 2 distinct segments, one that goes from this Upper Homestead intersection to Gravity Monkey, and the one that was just built by machine that Thomas did a nice video of how to help us with, that goes from Honeycomb down to the Prologue Trail and the Chimney Trail in here. So that's our project that's on the ground right now. I know Thomas has personally been getting out there to try and work on the finished stuff and made that video we have posted on our website. Do you want to touch on that for a second, Thomas?
I mean, I think anyone who's seen that trail, it's just such a nice change from the Puzzler. It's probably, I think, the only time we've been building out there and haven't found a rock. I don't think there's a rock in that mile. So, yeah, I mean, I think from kind of, we've looked at this side of the hill, these kind of, it's really nice side hill. It's not super steep, but steep enough that you get material. Yeah, I'm just really excited about kind of what that area offers. Because it is trails on the western slope that aren't rocky, which I don't think anyone's gonna complain about.
Yeah, great. And so again, we're not gonna harp too much on all these new projects, but we have the skills area, we have the 2 segments of this Quarantine Trail, which ideally will eventually be connected. And then this next image is a little hard to see, I'm sorry, but the concept is to build a green loop down near the Prologue loop. So we're looking at some different intersections in here and segments of trail, and likely this wouldn't be completed for another 2 years. But this orange piece on top of the green, that is basically a segment of the Quarantine Trail, and that's already built. So we're looking at how we can build other segments in here, including this one over here called Red, White, and Blue. And some connections below the Chimney Trail. So this is all stuff to stay tuned for. I think this could be a whole separate talk and call about some of these ideas and concepts. But we will move on so we can answer some questions. I'm going to go back to a map. And the first question that came up was about why we have access and the liability questions. Why would Massanutten be willing to give us access? And that's a great question. And that's kind of at the heart of this whole thing. So our number one goal as an organization and as our team that works on this is to preserve our access to the Western Slope. And so what happens behind the scenes for that is we do have an official agreement with Massanutten. And as you might expect, the goal is to for the coalition as an organization to take on some of that liability, particularly through insurance. So we take out some serious insurance policies that are costly in order to meet that obligation. And that's a big part of it. So we carry a pretty high level of insurance per Massannutten's requirements. And so a chunk of your Trail Pass dollars and or membership dollars go to just cover that insurance. And unfortunately, it looks like that cost might be going up quite a bit this year, and we're working on that right now. But that's really at the root of everything we do on the Western Slope, is to preserve that access. Because if we don't have the trails, the other things don't matter. So we're constantly working on that. Massanutten has been a really great partner. As you hopefully know, all the dollars that come in from the trail passes, the coalition keeps. And you have to be a member as well to join or to get your trail pass. So a lot of our members join for that reason. I don't have the numbers right now, but our trail passes that have gone out this year, annual passes, are in the probably 300 range, much higher than they were a few years ago when we were talking about 10 years ago, we were talking about the 40s. Any other access or liability comments, Thomas or Dusty?
No, not much.
Okay, that was a good question. That really, we don't talk about that a lot, but that is at the heart of what we do out there, and we're always thinking about it so we can preserve that access. We have a question about what kind of plan maintenance do we have for the existing trails in order to preserve them? And so I guess to start with that, I would say we are trying really hard, and one of our goals is to, whenever we have the machine out there, to also include some time for maintenance. One of the things where we wrestle with is, depending on the type of trail, what type of improvements it might need. So the amount of dirt we would need to move on some of the old trails, like some of these black trails in the center of the system here, because they're old road beds, would not be impossible by hand with volunteers, but would be a lot of work for maybe not the best product, or maybe only for one drain. So we're trying to identify where we can use a machine to do a lot of that maintenance stuff, and or if we could look at an entire trail corridor to completely rehab in the future. One thing we talked about is the Honeycomb Trail. Carl, Dusty, or Thomas, anyone want to chime in on kind of the maintenance balance versus new trails?
I think we do. I think there's a couple awesome behind the scene volunteers. Tim Cook comes to mind, people who are out there who are doing maintenance on a regular schedule. And I think it's where, Thursday Trail Work Crews originated just doing maintenance. And as our numbers have grown on weekly maintenance, it's become a harder thing to manage in terms of locations. So we've been trying to stay consistent with locations. We want to continue to maintain or even kind of regain our focus with maintenance. And this can be done a couple different ways. It can be done with our weekly crews. It can also be done with hopefully fostering more learning and getting small crews out there working on their own time schedule.
Yeah, and that's what we've been doing recently and when it seems to be working well, at least for us, is us being me and Carl and a handful of others, identifying maintenance needs, a lot of erosion needs, and trying to correct that just on our own time. With our time being a little more free as of recently, it's been nice to get out during the week instead of on Saturday, and or sometimes on Saturday too, and dealing with some of the maintenance issues. So far it's been a bit informal, but it is happening, and we are working on formalizing the process and formalizing the, like a list of all the projects, the maintenance needs that we do have, and then getting, people assigned to those or letting people volunteer to handle those, on their own time, or as a, smaller group or whatever. But so yeah, we're working on formalizing that now.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges, Thomas said that we've run into is our weekly work crews, especially the Thursday ones, which are sometimes larger, has been really hard to move around. So from a volunteer management, having easy access and a consistent location has been really important. But I think part of the solution, like Dusty and Thomas both said, is to have some small crews who can go about, and then to also make sure we use our machine time every year, or every time we hire a machine operator, to do some bigger drains and maintenance pieces. And the maintenance looks really different on a trail that we built versus some of the old farm roads. So we'll see. Stay tuned. Hopefully we can talk about some big improvements to trails like the Honeycomb, where we could do something that's often called like a road to trails conversion. Some of those old corridors are super wide, and you could make more of a fun meandering line down the existing trail and improve the drainage so that it rides a lot better on top of it. Dusty, Thomas, Carl, other pieces you want to touch on that we haven't? I'll add one more thing while you're thinking about that is, so in terms of future talks, I think we can certainly lay out some of the concepts and ideas we have for new trail design and where we think we want to put them. I know on our end, over the past year, we've redone the website and tried to really streamline the pass system. So we have a lot more day passes and a lot more annual passes going out. We're trying to do better with our survey and get more responses to our survey. So we've been tweaking that and hope to send that out with every new trail pass and have some data that's a little bit easier to quantify. Our existing survey, I think, has over 50, probably about 60 responses. And we haven't published a full cohesive look at it because honestly, the results are all over the place. So if anyone wants to see the raw data of the survey, please let me know and I will send you a copy. I've sent a couple out lately. Some of the things we hear consistently is people wanting trails closer to the parking lot, people wanting more flow or jump trails. But there's also a pretty strong group of folks who want trails up high in the rocks and continuing south towards the peak of the mountain. So I wouldn't say there's a consensus, other than people there's a clear ask for trails that are relatively easy to access from the parking lot. And I think more of the new school trail building of a little bit more smooth, flowy trails here and there where you can. We're limited a lot just by the terrain, and that's a big piece. And if you look at the map here and you look at where the trails have been built, most of them are kind of on the edges of this map because I know Thomas in particular was often looking for some really good side hills. So you find a drainage and you get in that side hill and then you dig and there's usually a lot more dirt there than if you don't have that steep side hill. So that's been where we've looked for a lot of trails in the past. And that's been one of the limitations of trails closer to the parking lot historically. But the most recent quarantine build that Thomas flagged in, the lower part that was built is on side hill, just below the Honeycomb, and has some really great dirt. So there are places that are close to the parking lot where that could be done.
I think one thing, I think this will be it's already been a pretty interesting year. But I think it'll be really interesting to see how the Western Slope changes with what we've seen as an incredible increased use, which is great. More people are getting outside, not just for bike. We've seen a lot more people hiking over there too. But I think that's just kind of, for us all to think about is, how the Western Slope's changing, what we think will happen here over the next year or two, because hopefully this use will more continually increase and more people are getting outside. So I think that's just more of a kind of thought just to kind of end on of, what's the Western Slope going to look like next year, this fall, or 5 years from now? And to me, it's pretty exciting to think about.
Yeah, and that's a good point to wrap up on. We're seeing a lot of increased use under the current pandemic. And as we put on the website and on our social media, The trail system seems like it can handle it just fine. We're mostly concerned about the parking lot and just asking folks to be really considerate in the parking lot, not hang out there. But the trail system, there's a lot of space to spread out, and a lot of the increase has been hikers. So they're not going quite as far from the parking lot. So if you're out there on your bike or you're trail running and you're getting a little bit higher up on the mountain, typically you're seeing not that many people. The caveat to that would be resort guests coming in from the top parking lot, but overall the system can handle that. So a lot of future topics we could touch on. One is that the Western Slope is open to e-bikes, which is a whole nother thing. And we're going to tell you a lot more in the future about some of our plans and projects. And our goal is to get more of an overarching plan for the Western Slope. Trails plan, and to get more people involved in that process. So if I don't see any more questions in the chat, if anyone wants to chime in, just unmute yourself. Otherwise, we'll wrap up here. Cool. Well, thank you, everyone. This is our first one of these, and like I said, we'll have more focus themes in the future about the Western Slope, but we're really excited that so many people are using the Western Slope and that it's growing so quickly. And we're really appreciative of all your support. We pull in a good bit of fundraising dollars from the trail passes every year. As I said, unfortunately, a good chunk does go to our insurance to keep the Western Slope access, but that's par for the course. And then we get to spend some of that money on machine operators to help our volunteer crews with some of the trail builds and maintenance. So that's right about an hour. So we'll wrap it up. Oh, I see one more chat here. All right, I think we're good to go. So thanks, everyone. And we will have, hopefully in the future, some more info about how you can be involved with the Massanutten Trails team as we lay out some more of our roles and as we hopefully aim to start more of our group events back up. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you.